Well, Don, it began for me in 1963 when I was assigned to the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers in Europe. I arrived in the summer of '63 and I was assigned to the Operations Division. I was further assigned to what we call SHOC, the War Room, the Supreme Headquarters Operations Center. And at that time I was given a cosmic top-secret clearance, which was and still is the highest level of security access that NATO has. When I was assigned to the War Room, I learned that a study had been initiated in 1961, and everybody was talking about it. They were gossiping about it. And the subject was UFOs, and that intrigued me a bit. When that study was concluded in 1964, and it was published, and I was still working in the War Room at that time, I had access to this document. I had a chance to read it. And having been exposed to it, I must tell you honestly that my life has never, ever quite been the same. Because I read first-hand reports, verifiable NATO military material that indicated that the UFOs were not only real, but they represented something far beyond anything I had ever imagined before. When the study was concluded in '64, they concluded that there were 4 different groups apparently coming and visiting us. Out of those 4 different groups, one group looked exactly like we do, so much so that they could sit beside you in a restaurant or in an airplane or in a theater, and you'd never know. And that particular point bothered the military guys a lot. The point being that some of these people from somewhere could be walking up and down the corridors of SHAPE headquarters, or they could be walking up and down the corridors of the Pentagon. One day at lunch, a lieutenant colonel made the remark, he says, "Jesus, do you realize they could even be in the White House?" And there was a little forced laughter at that point, I remember, because a lot of us over the years have had some misgivings about the occupants of the White House. But the point I'm making is that the idea that aliens could be here in our midst bothered the military, because if you're not paranoid when you go into the service, you're certainly trained very quickly to be so. It's the nature of the military mind, I think, to be paranoid. But that was only part of the story. The SHAPE conclusions in '64 were that there were 4 groups that we knew of. They were apparently interplanetary. Some very likely were interstellar. They even concluded that some of them could be intergalactic. When I retired in 1976, many of our military people knew at that point that we were not simply dealing with visitations from people from other planets or star systems. They had concluded by '76 that some of these visitors very well might be multidimensional in their source. The evidence that we had collected and the evidence that they had repeatedly demonstrated to us, and that's no accident. They became very clear after a time that there was a program or a process of some kind underway, that they had demonstrated over and over and over again that they apparently were able to manipulate matter and time. Now, this really shook up our scientists. There are a lot of new young scientists in particle physics today who talk about multiple dimensions. There's a brilliant young professor in New York by the name of Michio Kaku, who has written a brilliant book called Hyperspace, where they talk about 10 separate dimensions. I'm not enough of a physicist to try to explain to you what a dimension is, but the idea that there could be intelligences from somewhere else, from other dimensions coming and going into our reality. It's been quite a shakeup.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Clifford Stone. I was Sergeant First Class, United States Army. I had a secret clearance with nuclear surety. I could get the clearance that I needed to do whatever it was that was necessary for me to do at the time on special operations when I was called in on those. What I'm referring to here is that I was involved in situations where we actually did recoveries of crashed saucers, for lack of a better term, debris thereof. There were bodies that were involved with some of these crashes, also some were alive. While we were doing all this, we were telling the American public there was nothing to it. We were telling the world there was nothing to it. I'd like to go into detail on some of the cases, about the nuts and bolts cases right here. But the whole situation is, we've set back, we've told the American people that there's no such thing as UFOs. I've been involved where we covered these objects. We know them to be of extraterrestrials. In 1969, I had an event that happened to me while I was stationed at Fort Lee, Virginia. We went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. That would be my first exposure to any time that we would be recovering an unidentified flying object. When we went there, we already had people that was already in the facility. We were a backup team, which was supposed to be MBC, because there was supposed to be some nuclear materials that was on board this craft. Later on, most people involved were to be told that there was nothing on board it. It was nothing more than just a crash of one of our aircraft. I know better, because I was one of the people that approached it with a Geiger counter to get surface readings. I was the first person to go ahead and see that there were bodies on it. That would be the first of approximately 12 events. UFO crashes are not events that take place every day. They're rare. I know we're not alone in the universe. I know that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It's evidence that has been denied to the American people.
Clifford Stone had a spotless military record until the summer of 1986, when his Army commanders found out he was writing a book about UFOs. From that point on, Stone says, his life became a living nightmare.
If you have an interest in UFOs and you're writing Freedom of Information Act request and writing various senators, then there has to be something wrong with you. So they set me up for a mental health evaluation. Upon my return from seeing the legal advisor, they had already moved everything out of my office. I had been relieved of duty. They set up an office for me down in the basement. I was not to have any contact with any of the other cadre. As a matter of fact, the other cadre said that if they were seen talking to me, that they would be in trouble. They were talking court-martial.
For 22 and a half years, I served in the United States Army. During my tenure, I was on many occasions asked to serve as the official, unofficial UFO consultant dealing with UFO matters in the areas of my assignment. As a result of my involvement, I was able to ascertain that the United States government knew a whole lot more about UFOs than it was telling the American public. That there was an intelligence involved, that there was a highly evolved technology. I learned that to a degree, we were carrying on a dialogue with this intelligence. We were making every effort we could to acquire this technology and make it part of our own existing technology. We did this, I was told, in the interest of national security. We also had an officially sanctioned deception program. This was in total disregard as to the impact this would have on the individual witnesses and also on their families. This ultimately led to my disillusionment with the program and my involvement in it. I sincerely feel that no government has the right to destroy the lives of the people which it is supposed to serve. While I was in the military and I got to the point where I was no longer interested in trying to be part of the program and actually was going against the program, and I started to be very open and talking about what was going on. This resulted in every effort being made to try to destroy my military career. I was threatened, and they even tried to force my military retirement, or I could face possible court-martial. These actions failed, of course, as you know. At one point, I even had an individual come up to me, point a gun at my head, and inform me we could have a training accident, and this would end this foolishness once and for all. I firmly believe that those of us that served in a capacity of the U.S. government in some form or fashion and who were exposed to the truth, we have a moral obligation to the UFO witnesses, the real victims of the UFO phenomena, to expose once and for all this policy and to reveal the truth, and that is, we are not alone in the universe.
Initially, when we found out that UFOs were a reality, we started getting the reports. It became quite apparent that we did need to go ahead and have specialized people that go out in the field and recover these UFOs. And the best kept secret is that secret that's known by a very few. But you hit up on the expertise of a whole lot of people. So people had limited knowledge pertaining to their field as to what was going on. The teams were set up because now we knew we had some type of device that was in fact far more superior technologically than we were, and we needed to know where they came from. Ultimately, we found out that many of the UFOs were in fact of extraterrestrial origin. Now, what we wanted to do at that time was to acquire that technology and make it ours as quickly as possible. So these teams set out to wherever there was a report of even an alleged crash to go out and see if there was any type of debris whatsoever that we could recover. And there were those instances in which, due by mishaps, there were UFOs that were recovered, that had crashed, and we even acquired some of the bodies. A child handling a loaded gun with a hair trigger. The situation is we did not understand their technology. So even their propulsion system, as we tried to gain that knowledge, and if we accidentally, say, push the wrong button or hit up against the wrong wall, that might activate, say, a propulsion system. Then if you were caught in the realm of that propulsion system, you could conceivably wind up becoming a casualty. This has happened, and we have had people that happened. And in some instances, we had no remains of the victims even recovered.
Still have that fear. I mean, that fear is there.
Okay.
Even more so because you can feel the fear they have.
Okay.
We're a very dangerous species.
Sure.
So you better believe if they fall in our hands, there is that fear.
Okay. So, and this is part of the reason why I'm going to assume they approach you as a communicator or interfacer, as you call it, right?
Well, they're very concerned about our well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say that can't be so. Yeah, they are. We've done terrible things to ourselves. And they know this. And they're trying to understand certain things about us. And I think at the same time they're exchanging information, saying, hey, here's what you've done to yourself. I think that ties in a lot with some of the abductions that have taken place. I think it ties in with some of the cattle mutilations that have taken place. And I think it ties in with some of the people absolutely disappearing off the face of the earth.
Okay, so there are people that are disappearing on a regular basis, right?
Oh, yes.
And they're going to other planets, they're going to off-world bases, I'm assuming?
I don't have the answer to that.
Okay.
Now, if you're asking me if I could have left here, possibly. But, like I say, there's a purpose. And I don't know what that purpose is.
Is your mission to make people aware not only of the other entities out there and other, races and so on, but is it also to perhaps prepare or to warn of some event? Because you seem to be alluding to some event that you don't even know about.
As 2 points far out, they're becoming closer and closer together. To eventually, and we ultimately know it's going to happen, contact's going to be made. The NASA Department of Astrobiology held a conference in 2000. Forget the Brookings Institute report. This report came out and said, we don't really know what world reaction would be. It's a small report. How many people have read that report? How many people even know about it? When we say that we can accept the reality of visitors being here, we mean us ourselves. But even when we can accept that, how many of us are really ready for that face-to-face confrontation? And I can tell you, each time it's different. Each time there is that little something in the back of your mind that says, what's going to happen here? Mm-hmm. And each time you know that if something goes wrong, it could equate to the loss of life. Not because they're dangerous, but we're a danger to ourselves. So the whole situation is, how do you prepare a world population for that ultimate contact, which isn't, as astroastronomers used to believe, that it's going to be by a radio signal from deep space coming here, but it's going to be face to face, and it's going to happen on our planet.